Well, welcome back. This is Julie Baranek, host of the Seven Figure Builder Show, and I'm here today with my friend Anna Spitzinger. Hey, Anna.
Hello, hello.
I am thrilled to have you on. You are the fabulous founder of Stella's Desk and also the fabulous host of the Lead Like a Woman podcast. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, before we dive in, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do with your business and what really drives you in your business.
Sure, yeah. So I'm an online business manager for multi seven figure coaches. So I help coaches lead their teams, manage their operations, strategize, and plan their journey to eight figures. My passion is really with team leadership and team building, and really building that core C-suite of elite high performers that are going to help coaches go from typically the six-figure, multi-six-figure mark to eight figures and beyond.
I love that. And I'm a big proponent of surrounding myself with people that are smarter than I am. So always have been. And, I'm big on kind of scaling up my weakness areas. But how do you encourage people to really pull in the key members? Like so often we think we just need to clone ourselves, but is that the right approach?
Yes, so I hear that often, and also this belief, which is correct, about broadening your skill set via hiring, right? And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs hire reactively, meaning they kind of brain dump a list of tasks that they want off of their plate. And then they'll go into a giant Facebook group and say, I need somebody to help me with these things. And there I've delegated, it's off my plate, right?
Right.
And the difference between that and a proactive approach to hiring and team building is not only thinking about what you want off of your plate right now, but where is your business heading? What do you want your business to look like? And what team member, both their hard skills and soft skills that make them qualified, can help you grow? Because it's not just about taking tasks off of your plate right now. It's also thinking about what is the skill set, particularly the soft skill set, that is going to allow this person to grow with me as I grow. And I think the place that a lot of entrepreneurs get hung up is they'll hire someone and they'll build a role around that person, but then when they want to grow, now I need to hire another VA because this VA doesn't have that skill set, right?
Right.
And so now, rather than strategically team building and filling a role with a person, we're now just kind of like piecemealing based on the tasks that we currently need. So I think that's the big piece, is forward thinking and realizing that it's not just the tasks that's taking up your time, it's the brain capacity, it's what you're really stressed about and what's actually holding you back from getting to multi seven, eight figures.
Yeah, I love that because the visual I have as you're describing that is like you get to a place where you're so overwhelmed. Okay, I need to hire somebody to take that off my plate. And then if you're not strategically thinking in your hire, then you get to that place where you're so overwhelmed again. And then you need to hire again versus filling it before you get to that place of what's going to help me grow and create my own bandwidth so that I can be strategic in my business and not stuck in the weeds.
Exactly. And the other role that I see this happen a lot in, and I've actually been brought into teams as the OBM when they already had an OBM, is the role of online business manager, or anybody you're going to put in some sort of capacity of COO type role if you're a small business owner not familiar with the online business manager role. And typically our sort of claim to fame as OBMs are automations and systems and processes, which is something that we tend to be really good at and can zoom out and see the big picture. But what is often missing from a skill set of an OBM where I've been brought in is that leadership and people management component.
Mhm.
And if you really want a true OBM who's going to be your strategic partner and help lead and run your business, they need to have that leadership and people management skill set, or at least be willing to develop it.
Mm. Yeah. And where do you feel like that fits into play? Meaning like what what level of business, what level of growth do you feel like that becomes more applicable to be able to have that multiple layers in your business is kind of what I'm picturing, right?
Yeah. So of course, there's no hard and fast number. I think people always want me to tell them, I hit the 20K per month mark and now it's
Right.
time, right? Um, so the way I think about team building is first is your VA, right? Because you can still really delegate what you need done. I think SOPs are a great way to do that and train people really quickly. But typically, it's your VA, and then it's you and your VA. Really, a VA can help you grow to 60, 70K per month. But when this starts to when maybe you want to bring an OBM on is okay, I'm still in the day-to-day management. I'm still delegating. I'm still managing the projects. I'm still having to be both the back end strategy while I'm also very focused on growing my visibility, right?
Right.
Doing podcast interviews, really focused on marketing and those initiatives that are going to help you scale versus the back end management, customer support. As you grow to that level, the amount of customer support, questions about payments, right? Those sorts of things, the tech checkout building and those sorts of things. It's not just that you don't want to be doing it anymore, it's that you don't want to think about it anymore. And
Right.
that's the difference is the OBM takes over the thinking piece, right? And then can report into you, the status of things and strategically plan and sort of hash out and get creative with you, but you're no longer worried about the how any of that's going to get done. You're just thinking about the what, and then the OBM takes that, runs with it, delegates the tasks to the VA, and truly your capacity is left to create and work on visibility.
Yeah. And I always view it as like when I start losing track of those details, like obviously I need more help internally to be able to coordinate those details. So that I don't have to your point, keep them on my brain all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So a lot of us have a corporate background, like we have a specialty and expertise in what we do because of what we did before. So how does that differ in hiring in the corporate world versus hiring in the entrepreneur world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was really interesting to me when I joined this online business world to see that both the tone and the attitude and the effort, or kind of lack thereof, that this world tends to put towards hiring. And I haven't quite figured out why. I think maybe it's just the massive amount of people at your fingertips available to hire. And so maybe it kind of just feels like you can say, this is what I need, and someone will raise their hand and say, hi, I'm here to help, which is a great benefit of the online world, right? We have a global hiring pool. But what I noticed in corporate, though, is again, this piece of developing a role and then finding someone to fit that role versus hiring someone, then kind of like piling on and piecemealing a role around that person. So then when they leave, you're kind of left with a few different roles that you probably should be hiring
Yeah.
for. So I think it's that sort of understanding of proper team building, perhaps. And then I think the other piece is understanding then your role as the leader and as the visionary of the company and how that works into your team's success. Because there tends to be this disconnect between the team members and the coach as their leader, where it's simply you're here to do the tasks that I've assigned to you. Whereas what I believe and how I've seen and work in it every day is a much more cohesive, collaborative environment where the leaders are the inspiration, right? And if you think about really high performing corporate teams, like I know we just shared that we've both worked in that environment before, The leaders are the cohesion, right? Or if you haven't worked in a corporate environment, another analogy I like to use are the coaches of like Olympic teams, right?
Right.
They set the tone, and there is no one team member or even the coach who is above, below. Each core team member, the coach included, plays a significant role and has a significant purpose. And it's how they all work together in order to reach a goal. But what happens online is often there's no vision casting, right? So people aren't really quite sure what the goal is. They've just been delegated tasks, and it's very transactional, right? They do the task, they walk away from, they get their paycheck, and it's kind of over. And they're missing that cohesion and that vision. And so I think that's a big differentiator. And I think the value that we put into the hiring process, that it is an intentional process, that it can take time because it's important. And if you think of some of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time, right? Jeff Bezos, you think of even Elon Musk, if you want to go there, right? They didn't just hire the person closest to them who said, I can help, right? They intentionally and strategically hired someone who they knew complemented their skill set, who would be great at collaborating. And that doesn't always mean agreeing with you. Sometimes collaborating means disagreeing, and has major buy-in to your vision, right? They're aligned with your vision. And so I think that's the other key differentiator I see, is just the intentionality behind hiring and the value that entrepreneurs sometimes don't put into the process.
Yeah. And a couple other thoughts came to mind as you're describing that, right? Like so often we grew up in, I say grew up loosely, but we grew up in the corporate world, right? So we have that area of expertise. And in that area of expertise, you've got an HR team, right? Like there's rigor, there's process,
Yes.
there's intentionality there that, to your point, you create the role, you fill the role, right? If that person leaves, you fill it with somebody else. But you've got that structure. And in the entrepreneurial world, we have our skill set, and we usually go fast with our skill set, but we may not have been taught how to be a leader or have put the thought and rigor into that whole hiring process, which is of course where you come in. But that, that intentionality of building your team. And so therefore you are reactive, and therefore you're screwed and you're trying to fill a role. And then you kind of deviate your team because you're doing it in a hurry and haphazardly, which just becomes messy, right? So like that
Yes.
whole thing can become such a mess.
Yeah, and the other thing that I thought of when you were just talking that I see too, especially with very heart-led entrepreneurs who are very in tune with themselves, right? They rely a lot on their intuition. They can feel a vision before it's happening, right? They're very intuitive and very in touch with themselves. But where that can backfire is the hiring process, because so many times entrepreneurs will say, well, I feel like I like them. I like
Right.
them. I can feel it. And the only time your gut is really helpful in the hiring process is when they're not a good fit. Like,
Right.
right. And that is one of our gifts as women, is that intuition of like, you can almost get on a Zoom and instantly be like, oh, I wouldn't want to work with this person. But where it's not helpful is when deciding who to hire. If you don't have an objective process that can compare candidates, they don't go through a proper interview process where you learn their patterns and their behaviors and their desire to grow with you and their willingness to grow with you, your intuition and your heart, as in tune with yourself as you are, is still not objective in judging people in those ways, in those hard and soft skill ways, especially if you've never hired before.
Right. For sure. So what can people do to do it better? Like, what do you recommend for people?
Yeah. So the very first thing that I do with clients, and how I've developed, I'm launching a course called $1 Million Team coming out in November. And the very first thing you can do is do what I call a brain journal exercise. And this is meant to mimic the process I go through with a brand new OBM client, right? It's not just how you're spending your time every day. It's how you're spending your thoughts. It's how you're expending your brain capacity, your focus, what's stressing you out. So it's not just, oh, today I created content. Well, how did you feel when you were creating that content? Was it really hard? Did it stress you out? Did it annoy you? Did it take you away from staying in your zone of genius, right? So that's the very first thing, is to not just think about how you spend your time, but how do you feel when you're spending your time, and what is your true passion that you could do all day, every day. And I think sometimes this is hard for coaches or small business owners, because it's certainly sometimes not live coaching or not live hands-on work, and that could be hard to face. But that's the very first step, is to really get in tune with how you're spending your time and your brain capacity. The next step is to get very clear on the role that you are hiring, right? Its purpose. So why this role even exists, and what responsibilities are they expected to take on, right? And you learn that from going through that brain journaling exercise. And so you start to create the role that you want to fill. And as I mentioned before, I find the most strategic and most efficient way to build a team is to first hire the VA, then the OBM, then perhaps a tech VA as customer support gets heavier for that general VA. A tech VA can take over the actual tech integration and implementation and automations and that sort of thing. And then we have like specialized service providers, right? Like graphic designer, podcast editor, YouTube editor, those sorts of things. But that really is the most efficient and leanest way to build your team as an online business owner. So let's, for example, say that role is going to be a VA. Now we have our purpose based on the responsibilities. Like, this is the very clear mission of why I'm even hiring this person. And it's not just to take tasks off your plate, right? It's to do that efficiently. It's to do that effectively. It's to do that so that you have more strategic focus on other things in your business, right? It's not just the tasks on your plate. And so this is how we start to attract the caliber of team member that you really do need in a multi 7-8 figure business. Okay. So that's the next piece. And really familiarize yourself with the hard skills that they need, right? So the industry knowledge, the strategy knowledge, the tech expertise, right? Very, very trainable, right? With a good SOP, those skills, but more importantly, the soft skills. And this is a longer list, and it's harder to identify. And I can get into how I like to kind of pick up on these with people, but these are things like analytical and problem solving skills. This is like integrity, right? These are skills like communication and collaboration, working on a team. For an OBM, it needs to be leadership skills, right? So we start to identify and build out who this person is, how they behave, what their patterns are. And then consider some of the logistical components. So they need to be in your time zone. They need to be fluent in your language, your budget, the hours needed, those, right? And now you've really crafted your role description, right? And so that's the best place to start. And then it's finding that person. So my advice is that even if you're not hiring right now, the best time to look for somebody was yesterday, because the most savvy leaders, and you'll know this from the corporate world, right? Corporate recruiters are always scouting talent. And so I constantly have my eyes on standout VAs, OBMs, graphic designers, copywriters, constantly. So that when someone is ready to hire a client of mine or a consulting client, I can say, I have a few people that would probably be good candidates, right? So you can open it up to these giant Facebook groups. You can post it on Indeed. You can post your role description wherever you want. But typically, it's from observing their expertise and their behavior that I find the best people. and also in networks. So also if you're in masterminds, if you're in coaching programs, if you're in other Facebook groups, just ask, hey, do you guys have any good VAs that you have worked with or you are
Mhm.
working with? Or even if you're not hiring right now, right? Start to build your virtual Rolodex of these high caliber online service providers. Um, the other great place to look are Facebook groups for service providers, right? Because these are, so for example, Facebook groups for OBMs, because these are people who are invested in their craft, they're plugged into the community, right? They are focused on growth. So that's another great place to look. So that would be the next place, is not just these sort of passive desperation posts in Facebook groups of like, I think I need a VA, somebody help me, but a very intentional scouting process so that you can start to grow that network and also, like I said, observe patterns and behaviors. So that would be the next piece where I think people could spend more time, and it really isn't all that time consuming, right? You're already probably already doom scrolling. So
Right.
that's the next piece. And then the last component, which is where you'll really learn more about a person's soft skills, communication skills, how they present themselves, how they present their work, how they talk about past leaders, is the interview process. And this is probably where, I mean, most corporate people go wrong with this, right? So if you've never interviewed or hired before, this is the other skill set to build, is to not only know what questions to ask, but why you're asking them and what you're looking for in answers. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but it really is just a much more intentional process, understanding who you're actually looking for, why you're looking for them, and what is the caliber of person, both in their hard and soft skills, that can take you to eight figures.
I love that. And I'm kind of chuckling to myself because I love the interview process. Like from my corporate world, I just love that. Like, and it's funny when I got into the podcasting world, I'm like, this feels really familiar. And it like took me to that place because I
Oh,
really
that's
enjoy
funny.
this, like you wouldn't think that connection. Um, but yeah, soft skills are so important to me. I know looking for a recent team member, I'm like, okay, communication, massive, reliability, massive. Like hard skills, I can teach them anything. Like I need these
Yes,
basics, but those are non-negotiable. So,
absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs will go wrong, is like, I just need somebody who knows how to use Kajabi. Okay, well, that'll help you in like this 3 month
right.
time frame. But that person intellectually and, in many different ways, can they bring you to eight figures? Do they even want to?
Right.
Right. And so there's that. And then I also think part of that interview process is then looking at those results objectively so that you
Mhm.
aren't stuck thinking, how did I feel in that moment? And there was a great quote that I read in a book. It's called Who. It's called Who to Hire, or Who, like, I'll get you the reference for show notes because I think that's important. And it said, you can't rely on how much someone smiles to you at you in a 30-minute window on a random Tuesday about, if this person can help you grow to eight figures.
Right.
And that just is so true. Anybody can turn it on for 30 minutes, right? And so that's why I think the sort of continual scouting process, um, going through a few rounds of interviews, asking really intentional questions that allow you to build a history and a story of this person and their behavior and how they talk about team members, how they talk about past leaders, how they talk about challenges. Um, I think all of that is really important. And then you can look at all of that objectively and compare candidates that way rather than just, they seem nice and I liked them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm having flashbacks to interviews that I had myself in the corporate world as I've been in this world for, 20 plus years. But I remember one in particular, I'll never forget a couple of them, but one in particular, I was interviewing for like a technical job, right? Like my background is in coding. And so that's kind of how I came up through my career. And um, I was interviewed and they asked me, oh God, let me see if I can get this right. They said you're spending, you're part of a cult of when you work here, right? Like we all belong to a cult and you believe wholeheartedly in our cult. And as part of our belief system, you believe that you only have 24 hours left on earth. And your friends and family have like disowned you and you only have 24 hours left on earth. How would you spend the last 24 hours on earth? I'm like, are you kidding me? That was literally the question. And I'm like, I would spend it with the people I care about the most. Like, what, how do people answer that? Like, I asked them, like, how do people answer that question? And they're like, well, some people would say I'd go on a shooting spree. And I'm like, okay, I can understand how that would like raise red flags. Oh my
I
God.
know. Or the other one that was always a favorite, because the other reason that I got so interested in this as an entrepreneur and helping coaches is because I've been in their shoes. I was
Right.
asked to interview candidates for my assistant where I had no training. I was not in a, I had no skill set to be interviewing or picking someone. And I based it solely off hard skills. I regretted it for the last 2 years of my corporate career because you cannot get rid of people so easily in
Right.
corporate, right? And I spent the next 2 years trying to avoid him, right? So it was like, I get how you get in this position. But what I was going to say is the other sort of style of interview I've seen are like, what kind of pets are you, a dog or a cat person? Or, how do you like to spend your free time and all of these
Mhm.
things? And this very rapport building based interview style, which is great if you want a friend or you're going on a date. But we're building teams of elite high performers who can also be friendly and collaborate in a team and have interpersonal skills, right?
Yep.
But I think some of those questions just come from, well, I don't know how else to ask. And to your point, I mean, if that was their answer, I would have hoped that they never got to that point in an interview, right? And that's sort of that constant scouting and like looking at patterns of behavior of
Mhm.
like, is this person a mass a mass shooter? I don't know.
Yeah,
So
I know. I remember another one. I was working or interviewing to work at eBay, which I ended up working there. And um the interview started with a whiteboard coding experience. Like you had to code things out on a whiteboard. And they give you this example. It's like, okay, code it out. I'm like, okay. So it started with that and it ended with I was like, I have one more question for you. He said, and the basis of your entire interview rests on your answer to this question. I'm like, okay. He's like, Star Wars or Star Trek? And I'm like, Star Wars. He's like, okay, great. And so next steps will be
oh my gosh.
so
I
anyway,
know.
you're
And
giving me
yeah, so
flashbacks here.
it kind of becomes in those interviews, it really becomes more about the interviewer,
Right.
and which this is your opportunity to just observe.
Hmm.
Right. And so you ask the strategic questions, they're very intentional. You already know kind of in the back of your mind what might be red flags, green flags, right?
Right.
But yeah, that interview style I think just becomes much more about like trying to sell you on the role or trying to be your
Right.
friend or whatever, and it's not actually valuable.
No, I know. It just made me laugh. I'm like, okay, whatever. But yeah, no, to your point of like pulling out, being intentional about it, having a set of questions that you're going to ask that makes sense.
Yeah.
Get
And
you
I
the
think just
information that you need.
yes, and I think just really going into the process with the attitude of I'm building my C-suite, right?
Right.
And so if you haven't worked in a corporate world, the C-suite is like, you know, people work their entire careers to get there, right? It's the CEO, it's the CFO, it's the COO, it's the executive assistant, right? It is like high level mastermind of people
Right.
who are building a multi-million to billion-dollar company, right? And that is the caliber of person that we're looking for. And that is the mindset and the intentionality that you should go into this process with if you are serious about building a massively successful brand.
Absolutely. So how do you help people with this? Like for people that are listening, they're like, yep, I need help, but I'm stuck.
Yeah, so the best way right now is to follow me on Instagram. It's at Anna.Spitzinger. I have a couple free resources there. As I mentioned, I'm coming out with a course called Million Dollar Team, so that'll be available in November. And we'll also include the delegation exercise that I mentioned, the interview strategy, what to look for as far as hard and soft skills, and how people exhibit that, right? So it really is an entire behavioral profiling process to bring both you through as the person hiring to decide who you really need, and then the person that would fit that role perfectly. But that really is the best way to learn more and to learn more about my philosophies on leadership and hiring, especially hiring and leading small teams as an entrepreneur.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And where can people find you online? You said on Instagram, definitely.
Yeah, Instagram. Also, my website is stellas-desk.com. And yeah, those are the two best places to find me, as well as my podcast, Lead Like a Woman, which is on Apple and Spotify podcasts.
Absolutely. And we'll have all the links below. And I'm curious, like you've accomplished a ton, both in your personal life, professional life, but how do you define success? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I love this question because, you know, as my quote unquote success has grown monetarily, right, and maybe visibility wise, for me, it's really having passion for life. For me, success is having passion for life, for waking up excited, for feeling gratitude for what you have and what you get to do every day. And the fact that you get to make money off of that and also lead an amazing team of people who are so into and aligned with your vision and are equally as passionate about it, that's success to me. And most days it doesn't even feel like I'm working. And that's what we all want, right? So I just happen to be able to make money doing it. So yeah, that for me, passion and that zest for life, that's success.
I love that. Absolutely. Yeah. When you can make money doing what you love, hey, there's nothing more than that. And I'm curious too, if you had the attention of the whole world for 5 minutes, what would you tell them?
Well, when you say whole world, that also means our world leaders.
Yeah.
And what I really wish that more leaders understood is that leadership is not about power and notoriety. It's about the human connection and inspiring people. And I think if more leaders were focused on connecting with their people and on inspiring them to be and do their best, then this world would be a very different place. If leadership was not so focused on power and notoriety, and it was really focused on the people that they are leading, I think that's what I would say is really try to reframe leadership for those people.
I love that. And that applies top to bottom,
Yeah.
all the above, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Anna. We'll definitely check you out at Stella's desk. I know you've got some awesome gifts there and follow you on Instagram. And I appreciate you being on today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And if you found value in this episode, please do share it. That's how people find us. And you can find me at sevenfigurebuilder.com. And I will see you on the next episode.